Hey guys, welcome to my channel. And India-US trade talks are back in spotlight, and most of you probably already know about it, right? Lots and lots of videos have been made about it. Lots and lots of discussions have been done on this thing. So I'm not going to make another video where I'm talking about India-US trade deal. See, US has agreed to slash tariffs on Indian goods from punishing 50% down to just 18%. Then India's Commerce Minister Mr. Piyush Goyal, he also confirmed a joint statement is expected in the next 4 to 5 days, and with full bilateral deal likely signed by mid-March. That's the initial timeline. Okay, but here's the twist though. The President Trump claims that India has agreed. Okay, hear me out again very carefully. President Trump has agreed claim President Trump claims that India has agreed to completely stop buying Russian oil, shifting to the US or even Venezuelan crude. Yet the Indian side has stayed completely silent. If you go look at Prime Minister Modi's tweet, if you go look at uh, listen to India's Commerce Minister, his statements on it, it's just there is no confirmation whatsoever. Now, here's the interesting part about this whole thing is that I was listening to U.S. Ambassador to India, Sergio Gore, his in his interview when he was asked about the Russian oil part, he simply deflected it. He just simply said, yeah, we will look into this, that, all that, and not even once he clearly answered that question. Now, this whole thing actually takes a whole another turn when Kremlin, that is Russian side, basically, they flat out rejected President Trump's claim, saying that they have not heard anything from New Delhi about these about India not buying Russian oil. So what exactly is going on? Will India actually stop buying Russian oil? If yes, then what actually forced the shift, right? And if not, this is when actually things get tricky, right? If not, then why is India willing to risk this massive deal? I mean, technically, if you look at it, then you find that India is running at least $50 billion of trade deficit with Russia. Okay, India is running $50 billion trade deficit with Russia, and with the US, India is $40 billion surplus, and then they are planning to grow this trade in next 5 years to $500 billion, whereas with the Russia they're planning to grow the trade to $100 billion in next 5 years. So what is actually India's strategic play here, right? You have to question this thing. This is going to be all about the geopolitics of oil. Okay, and why lots of these things are happening, and why India is not going to do what it's not going to do, and why India will do what India will do. Okay, so let's get started. Let's talk about it. Please do like and subscribe. Okay. Hey guys, welcome back. So now before we get started, okay, let's look into the background a little bit. I have made a video about it and you can go look at it. You can check it out. I'll post the link down below. Okay. But before we get started, please do like and subscribe. Your liking, subscribing, sharing, and your feedback does help me a lot more than you know. Okay. So please do help me so that I can keep making the content and keep creating content, keep improving. Okay. So let's get into the background. Let's get into the video directly. Now, as if we look into the past here, okay, what do we see? President Trump says I'm not going to read all this, okay? President Trump primarily he says that with ending we spoke about many things, including trade, ending the war. Where he agreed to stop buying Russian oil and to buy much more from United States and potentially Venezuela. Okay, and this will end the Ukraine war. But question is that is this really about ending the Russia Ukraine war, or there is some other major play here from the American side? We are going to talk about that in the video. Okay, just so stay with me till the end. I can promise you I will answer all these questions, and I will explain you how the geopolitics of oil and how understanding the market you actually explains everything. Okay, so stay with me till the end. All right. So is this really about ending this war? If that is the case, just simply, I mean, just stop supporting Ukraine, because more you support Ukraine, more people are gonna die. That's the bottom line. You stop supporting Ukraine, and guess what? War will end in 2 days. What the hell? But anyways, that's not the point here, right? Now let's look at Prime Minister Modi's statement. What he's saying: wonderful speaking, my dear friend. At least they're in good terms now. The back on track. Okay. Delighted that made in India products will now have a reduced tariff of 18%. He only talks about the tariffs and all that. Okay. Big thanks to President Trump on behalf of 1.4 billion people of India, and blah blah blah. When two large economies, world largest democracies, work together, it benefits our people and unlocks immense opportunities. Mutually beneficial cooperation. President Trump's leadership is vital for global peace, stability, and prosperity. India fully supports his efforts for peace. I look forward working closely with him to take our partnership to unprecedented heights. But interesting thing is that he never says anything about stopping to buy Russian oil. Then it gets even more interesting. Why? Because there is no statement from the Indian side about not buying Russian oil. And then here's the thing. India's Commerce and Industries Minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal, very talented guy, very bright guy, very sharp man, all right? We have to sign a joint statement in the next 4 to 5 days. That's what he's saying. That trade agreement is almost ready, and we have to sign a joint statement in the next 4 to 5 days. I had made a video about the India-US joint statement from last year, the February 13th, 2025. Okay, so you go check out that video as well. I'll post the link down below. Okay, but here, that's the thing. So by next Monday or Tuesday, you will see this happening. Okay. Now, interesting thing is this, that President Trump is making all those claims, but neither he in fact made an 18-minute long video, but not even once he mentioned that India is not going to buy Russian oil, or what's not. Then, as you saw, PM Modi also. Then also interesting thing is that I watched the full interview of Ambassador Sergio Gore, US ambassador to India. And he when he was asked about the purchase of Russian oil, India's purchase of Russian oil, then he just simply deflected the question. And he did not answer the question, and he deflected it. He moved on to another subject. Okay. Totally complete twist and total change of subject. All right. So now, even more interesting thing is this: that Russian news agency TASS, it says that India's immediate halt of Russian oil imports is extremely unlikely. Refineries reps and analysts clarified that there has been no government directive to stop purchasing of Russian oil. They don't have any indication that that's gonna happen. Okay. Now, so what exactly is going on in this whole entire thing? And that's exactly what we are going to decipher. Okay. Now, one thing I'm going to, first of all, without much ado, without much drama, okay, I will just simply give you my assessment of it. My assessment of this whole thing is that if India buys the Russian oil based on the mathematical calculation that, hey, India, US are planning to increase the trade to $500 billion in next 5 years, and then India and Russia are planning to take their trade to $100 billion in next 5 years. So which one is better? On paper, it looks like India US deal is better. Then again, if you look into it, then you find that between Russia and India, there is almost 40 to 50 billion dollars of trade deficit, which they're trying to reduce probably at this point, considering that Russia has upped Indian imports. So it seems like probably that can accommodate 10 to 15 billion more dollars. So that means the trade deficit will probably come down to $35 billion. But India has trade surplus of $40 billion with US as far as goods are concerned. Okay. So if you, on paper, from expansion point of view, from scalability point of view, from money point of view, from technology point of view, from all angles, seems like uh, India US deal is very good. But I can give you my assessment. My assessment here is that India is not going to stop buying Russian oil, and we all know this thing. Okay, there is a lot at stake here. Okay, and that's what exactly we are going to talk about, and I'm going to show you why India will not stop buying Russian oil anytime soon. See, in geopolitics, anything is possible. Okay, there are no guarantees. There is a possibility that probably next Russian president may be completely anti-India. Who knows? If they're completely anti-India, they may simply start to do some wacky things, and nobody knows why. And then turns out that India and Russian relationships are sour completely. Look at the US-UK relationship. Did anyone ever think that that relationship is gonna go sour completely? But it happened, right? So that's how it's possible, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. But why? So that's what we are going to answer in this video. All right, guys. So stay with me till the end. This is going to be very interesting video. All right. So first reason is this. First of all, let me share my slide. Okay. So first reason is that the Russian Urals pricing. What is Russian Ural? Russian Ural is basically the oil that is produced or that is extracted from the Ural mountains in Russia. Though they call that thing Russian Urals because of that, because the deposit is found in the Ural mountain. So Russian Ural pricing. So here's the interesting thing: the Russian Ural pricing basically, if you look at it, then you find that Brent pricing is, if Brent pricing is, let's say, 67 to 68 per barrel, $68 per barrel, then Urals that are delivered to India, they are minus, they are less, at least they're by $9 to $11 per barrel at the delivery, meaning that 67 to 68, so let's say 11, so that's going to be around $57 per barrel, so 56 to 50 $59 per barrel. Okay, based on this. So this is what average delivered Ural range from 56 to $59 per barrel. This is what India pays to Russia to buy the Russian crude. Okay, that's number one reason. Now some of you are like, oh, so what's the big deal about it? Big deal is that let's look at the oil pricing. I'm going to show you the oil pricing. All right. Now, let me actually show you the oil pricing here. Now, if you look at this, okay, so here only things that matter is WTI crude, Brent crude, and then in certain cases you can look at OPEC and all that too. But lots of other countries sell, but OPEC is not that um important at this point because it doesn't change. So if you look at it, okay, if you look at it, 65, 63 and all that, right? But if you go back here and look at the WTI crude, that is West Texas crude, right? The Permian region one. That's current price is 63. Brent crude is 67.88. Okay. That is from British. Okay. So this is the price right now. This is what they are selling at. And even the OPEC is also selling at what, 63, 64, around that. But this price varies. All right, that price varies. So from there you can tell that India is getting a very steep discount. So that's one reason that India is not going to stop buying that oil. You cannot change this thing at all in any way. All right, now, so you guys are thinking, this is just some bogus reasoning and this and that. Oh, we all know this. Hold on, have patience. Okay, I can assure you that you're gonna learn a lot. All right. Now, then reason number two is what India does then. India buys all that oil, then what India actually does with it. Some of you are like, oh, India sells it to European buyers and this and that. Yes, fair enough, of course. Lots of it, India actually simply sells it. That's the reason number two. So India basically buys the oil and India sells that oil. Okay, and it not the oil, but actually what it's called is the refined crude products. Okay, so net margin is basically product revenue minus crude input minus refining cost. Okay, so the so this is what India does. Reason number two is that India sells that refined crude product. and it sells at the global benchmarking prices. Okay, what do you mean by global benchmarking prices? I will talk about that in a little bit more in detail, but let me just say that if India buys it at 57 and India sells it at, let's say, $10 more or something, okay? So say 67 or 70, around that. I'm just giving you an average or a hypothetical number right now, okay? Then that's profitable business for India, right? And not to mention, India actually gains the market with it. You have to understand this, that oil market is gaining the your you have to have foot in the ground. You have to be in that business. Just few years ago, India was not in this business. India was nowhere to be found. But now India is the number one seller of the product. So much so that, hold on, so much so that, so much so, okay, I'm going to show you something interesting actually. So much so that there is a, right here, you see there is an Indian basket here. This is Indian basket. So it comes down 67.40, which is the rate at which India, on an average, India imports. So India's importing cost of oil is almost that much from other sources. Okay. So my point was over there is just to show you that even India is now visible over there. Okay. So that's reason number two, meaning first India buys the cheap crude oil, then India sells it at a higher price, so India makes money from it. What's the big deal about it, right? Big deal is that it's important. It's important because now you're gaining market. You are providing the crude oil, crude products, the products that are refined crude products, to the European markets, to other countries where there is no refinery. There are countries, I'll tell you this, that there are countries, they have crude oil wells and all that good stuff, but they don't have the refinery. So what they do is that they sell their crude and then they import the refined crude products. For example, just 10 years ago, in fact not even 10 years ago, during around the COVID time frame or before that, couple of years before that, Nigeria, Nigeria is a oil producing country, okay? And Nigeria would sell its crude to purchase the refined crude products back, import. And that was putting lots and lots of pressure on Russian economy, oh, sorry, Nigerian economy and Nigeria's forex reserves. So finally, Nigeria set up its own Dalgote refinery, and then now they started to sell their refined crude products and all that. But so, just as an example, that there are countries who deal with this type of problems. Okay, so there is a vast market on the of this. All right. So this is why it becomes very important that you have to buy the crude and then you have to sell it somewhere, sell it to the customers that need it. Right. So there is that. Now, the third reason. Now, before we get into all that, let's look at the refining, the calculation, the actual uh, play here. What exactly, how much, what is the profit margin for India when India actually sells this crude? Okay, and then I'm going to explain you how all this actually works. Okay, now, first of all, right here, number A, conservative yield model per barrel of crude. So, when you buy a barrel of crude, so normally, uh, this is very conservative mode where you will see at least diesel 35, it will have 35% diesel, 20% gasoline, then jet fuel 10%, then fuel oil will be 15%, fuel oil as in like kerosene and all that. Okay, and then others you get LPG, naphtha, bitumen, that is 20%. Okay, now each of these things, this sells at a different price in the market, this sells at a different price at market, in the market. Jet fuel sells at a different price in the market per barrel. Okay, so you have to understand that. So you buy crude in one fixed price, but when you are selling the refined crude products, then you sell them at uh, different product prices. Okay, so diesel has a different price, gasoline has a different price, jet fuel has a different price, kerosene and all that has a different price. Okay, now then, so what is the price for all this? Diesel sells at $18 your BBL, then you have gasoline 14 BBL, jet 20, fuel oil 10, and then others sell at 5. All right, that's the average pricing in the market. All right, now then let's look at the, so based on all this, the numbers that I just showed you, if you look at diesel, let's say if it 30, if you believe this right here, if we go with that number, okay, not believe, but that if we go with that, then diesel price will be what, 6.3. Then you take 20%, then you, what do, you do multiply it by 14, you get 2.8. Then jet is zero point 0.1, that is 10% here, right? So you multiply it by 20 because the price was 20 here. Then you so you get 10, sorry, 2. Then fuel oil is 0.15, and you multiply it by minus 10, and then you do 1 minus 1.5, and then rest is 1. So weighted crack, basically, when you, because the whole process is called cracking. Okay, so weighted cracking is basically per barrel will be 10.6 per barrel. Okay, so meaning that in from one barrel, if you do that thing, then what you do, you make this much of uh, a weighted profit from a particular barrel. All right, this is our 10.6. All right, in layman terms. All right, now then there is a thing called, so product revenue per barrel. Let's look at the product revenue per barrel. So that is called gross product worth in the oil terms. That's called GPW. Okay, so if Brent is at 68, okay, so 68 plus 10.6, because this is free from your um you have to sell it at the benchmark prices, right? When you're selling it at benchmark prices, what do you do? The benchmark prices are Brent prices. They are not the Russian oil prices. You have to understand this. So you're not going to add this to 57. What you're doing is, when you're setting up the benchmark prices, you are saying that, okay, 68 is the benchmark. So what do? You are selling at 78.6 dollars per barrel. That's what you are making from this whole thing. Okay, and if Brent is 67, then you are making this much. Now let's say refining cost is $6 per barrel. Okay, you have to take that into account as well, right? So so when you do that, then midpoint example, let net refining margin per barrel. Net refining margin per barrel is important. Okay, so 68, Urals 58, margin is 10 here, then product revenue is 78.6. Okay, and then refining cost is this much. So what do? You basically take the product revenue minus the Urals price. Okay, that's now when you're calculating the net refining margin, then you will look into it, this thing. Okay, then you do 58, and then what do? Minus 6. Then what happens? You get 14.6 per barrel. Okay, so uh so when you do this, meaning that when you buy a barrel of oil, crude from Russia at $58 per barrel, then you are gaining this much of margin from it, $14.6 per barrel. Okay, and so what exactly is happening? So sensitivity across the discount band, when you look at the discount and everything else, 59. So then sensitivity basically, if you are getting 15, if you are buying it at 59, then of course this is gonna be, margin will reduce, right? So you're getting 13.6. But if you're buying at 57, then your margin grows, the $2 difference, right? So that's basically 15.6. So net margin here is between this and this, 13.6 to $15.6 per barrel. That's how much margin is in this thing. Okay, now now so the reason number 3, now keep this in mind, what I just talked about, you have to keep that in mind. Okay, now reason number 3 is that India's profitable refining arbitrage. What India does with this whole thing, that $15.6 per barrel profit. India buys cheap crude, okay, sells refined crude at market price. I just showed you how the calculation is same as the average crude price and all that, right? So what happened? So now think about it this way: if India is selling, okay, if India is selling the crude at what? With the margin. So if India is buying crude at 57 and the profit margin is what? $14.6 outside 13. So India is basically selling it at what? $68 per barrel. Okay. Now, if India is selling it at $68 per barrel, then what do you see here? Most of these things you see 63, 68, like that, right? And then what do you see here? You see 66, 65, right there, right? Then you see 56, like that. This is Canadian old. Most of it goes to US. Okay. That's why you see the prices are low. But here, OPEC 65, 63. Some of this is just a blend, so we don't consider that. Okay. But my point is this: the point of it is that if India is selling the oil, sorry, the refined crude oil products, if India is selling that as 65 to $66 per barrel, then why would a country want to actually export the crude? They're like, hey, you have to deal with the break even cost, you have to deal with risks and all that, insurance, whole 9 yards. Why not just simply buy the refined crude products from India and be done with it? So what it does, it basically weeds out all the competitors that are selling the crude oil. Now who is benefited from it? See, when crude oil goes out of the market, okay, when nobody else buys the crude, when the countries start to buy the refined crude products, then sellers basically, they are at loss. They are not making money. Who's benefited from it? Russians are benefited from it. Okay. And when India sells that crude, refined crude products, that is diesel, petrol, all that, then who's benefited from it? India is benefited fitted from it. Why? Because this is how India is acquiring the market, a market where India doesn't even have the crude. Okay. Now, India doesn't have the crude, but by doing this, what India is doing is that India is actually slowly and slowly grabbing the market. That's how India past 3 4 years, India has been the number one seller of the oil, the refined crude product. Okay. So why? Because countries just cannot compete with that. Even the crude sellers cannot compete with that kind of refined product, right? So let's say it's like saying this. It's like this. Uh, uh, that if a country is importing, is giving somebody iron ore, and then they import, and and then they're importing the steel at some from some other country, right? So it's like how that is beneficial is to basically go and dump all the money into, mining the iron, and then after that you are exporting that iron just to import the steel. Why not just directly import the steel if it is cheaper, right? So it's somewhat like that. But you can look, I think I explained it to you, so I'm not gonna get into too much into, but that's the whole thing. So what India is doing is that India is taking over these markets of the countries that are that don't have crude, and also the countries that have crude but they don't want to put money into refining and all that too much, because it is cheaper to buy the crude. For example, another example is Canada. Canada is going to sign the oil trade deal with India. And what they're going to do is this. Can you guess? What they're going to do is that they are going to sell crude to India, and then they're going to import refined crude products from India. Now, some of you like, Hey, so what? Canada doesn't have refinery? Oh, we don't believe you. No, Canada has refinery. Canada, in fact, has 19 refineries. Okay, but then again, Canada doesn't need refineries. Canada is very big on climate and all that too right now. So lots of it actually crude, lots of crude, almost 70 to 80% crude that is in Alberta. It goes to the United States, and then United States uses its refineries to refine that. Okay, that's what's happening. Now let's go look at the price, Canadian crude price. Okay, let's look at the interesting thing. That's why it gets even more interesting. All right. So let me show you. Now look at the prices here. Look at the price. 56, 57, 57. Then sweet crude, use high sweet crude, this middle eight access, this. Look at that. Now look at all this right here. Light sour blend, then central Alberta 56.99, peace sour, these are heavy crude. Light is basically with the petrol. So what do you think? This is also almost as good as what Russian crude, right? As good as far as price is concerned. That's what I mean. Okay. So if India buys that as well, and what India will do is gonna sell it to Canada. Then there are a few other countries that India is going to sell the same crude. Profit margin is there. Okay. And we just calculated the profit margin. Now, and this is why, if you think that I am bluffing here, I'm just cooking all these things. This is why India's refining capacity to expand by 20%, expand 20% by 2028 on robust run rates demand growth. So India is going to increase its refining capacity. They are working on it. In fact, not just 20%. I think they're gonna go more than that. This is just the initial calculations. Okay, India's refining capacity is set to expand more than 20%. Like I said, over the next 3 years, as growing domestic and overseas demand for oil products is pushing existing refineries to run at 100%, run at over 100% capacity, the country's petroleum minister Hardeep Singh Puri said. So other countries, their refineries are running at 100% capacity. They don't want to set up more refineries either. You have to think about that. They don't want to increase the capacity of their refineries. Why? Because it's not worth it. Why? Because at the end of the day, you are going to drill the crude for the reasons I told you, and you're going to sell the crude. So you are getting the refined product at the same price as crude. Why would you want to do that, right? That's not a profitable business. Now, looking ahead, India's refining capacity utilization is set to increase by 256 million metric tons to 309 million metric tons by 2028. More than just infrastructure, this expansion is about creating an energy secure and opportunity rich future. He said, adding the refinery runs in recent months remained as high as 103%. Now, so S&P, all these numbers are there with 58% increase coming from brownfield expansion, while the remaining. So basically, well, all in all, point is that this is India's biggest play that they are going to take. They are working to slowly and slowly acquire this whole market without even having the crude. Okay, so and you're gonna see this is gonna even grow more, and uh, India may end up buying Venezuelan crude too. If Venezuelan crude, India gets it as at a sanction price, meaning that India may just go and talk to US and say that, hey, if you want to get China out of there, how about you give us that oil at a discounted rate, almost this much profit? What we will do is that we will sell that oil all over the place, and chances are that US may agree to it, meaning that this is going to actually create a big crack in the oil market too. Why? Because considering that if all the refineries are running at max, and other countries, the crude producers, they are not going to increase the capacity of their refineries, then who is going to crack the market? Country that is actually selling the refined oil. I mean, refined crude product, not refined oil is not the right term. I just want you to know this, okay? Refined crude product. They are the ones who will be running the show because they are the middleman. And what's going to happen after that? They're going to select the crude suppliers, and then they are the ones who are going to actually control the market, the pricing, and everything else. Right now, that's the whole idea. That's the whole entire game. Now, if you notice, now another thing that's happening is this: India has just gotten into the talks with the Gulf countries, for free trade agreement. What do you think India is going to import from the Gulf countries? Think about it. Desert, sand, or just as a sarcasm, water? No, we know that thing. So what India is going to import from them? Free trade agreement. See, what India is going to import from them is the crude oil. That's the whole thing. Crude oil, LNGs, the natural gas, all that. And then India is going to take that, and India is going to pressure them to lower the price. How they're going to lower the price? They're going to lower the prices by free trade agreement. So all the nonsensical things will be removed, the tariffs or any other excise duties or import duties, all that things. Whatever is there, because profit margin there, if you look at it, is very steep, right? $15 per barrel, and it's actually, it looks like it's a lot of profit, but actually it's not, given the situation. Okay, so that's why India is signing the free trade agreement. This is why they're planning to increase the refining capacity and all that. That's the big play. It's not just about the Russian oil, and that's what has worried the United States. They are worried that their oil market won't be able to compete with a cheap crude refining competition. Why? Because you are, your break even price comes to around, that just the break even price is around 57 to $58 per barrel, and break even price is 57 to $58 per barrel, and you have to sell it. So how much you're going to sell it for? You're, what you saw was the average price, 65, 66 was the average, but actually if you want to make profit, then you have to sell it for more, 70 plus, 70, 72, 73, like that. Now, so how they're going to compete with all that? That's where the concern is. So only way that is possible is that if India starts buying the Russian oil, then at least India will not sell the large amount of refined crude product. So somebody else will try to take that market. You have to understand this. Okay, this is a tactics using the Russia Ukraine war to hit the Indian business. Okay, now that's the reason number three, and that's the India's play, or India's long play. Okay, so now reason number four is pretty obvious type reason. For those, anybody who has worked in this thing, who has understanding of these things, then they will tell you that Indian refineries are configured for this crude. Okay. Now, if you look at the numbers, Ural is basically medium sour crude. I showed you. API low is 30. Then you have your sulfur is 1.5 to 2%. That's the density and sulfur content into it. India's large refineries are designed to run medium sour at high utilization. Okay. Point in case is that they're all different. Now, if you start to do the whole cost penalty and all that into this thing, okay, so a mismatched crude can reduce diesel jet yield by 2 to 5 percentage point, 2 to 5%, and then cost penalty, harder barrels increase hydrogen energy and catalyst usage, right? You So you will have to use extra things, extra catalysts, extra chemicals to really increase the yield. That in itself will extra that add to the cost, right? So that's going to add to what? A 1 to 2 BBL in processing cost. So that's going to increase the processing cost, right? Now, if India is purchasing 1.2 billion per day, a $1 BBL margin hit will be what? 1. 2 millions per day, and in a year that's going to cost will be 438 million dollars per year. And if India does this at 2 BBL, then what's going to happen? Margin hits equals 2.4 millions per day. That is 876 millions per year. Okay. So that's how much damage happens India will have to deal with if India basically decides to change its refineries or tweak it. Yes, I know people say that they are, oh, it can be tweaked, that's not a problem, and this and that. Now, let me put this in perspective. That is a damage of 438 millions per year. In 10 years, the damage is 4.38 billion dollars. And in 5 years, the 5 years where India and Russia are planning to increase their trade to 100 billion, and India and US are planning to take it to 500 billions. In 5 years, India is going to be taking, if that is, if it is 1.2 million per day, right? That type. Then India will take loss of almost 2 to 3 billion dollars in that in 5 years. I'm not even going for 10 years. 5 years is going to take 2 to 3 billion dollars. That is at the first one. Second option, that is 8.76 billion in 10 years, and that's going to be, let's say, 4.5 billion dollars loss in 5 years at that rate. And not to mention India will lose that market, right? And that's where the problem is, that capturing the market is the key here. Okay. And other thing is this, that even if, let's say, India does not do it, okay, if India does not do it, then what's going to happen? Somebody else is going to enter the market. It's not like that Russian crude is there and India starts buying Russian oil, then there are not other players that will not buy Russian oil. Okay. Russia, first thing you have to understand is Russians are Russians. They are not Iranians that you're just gonna go and bully somebody and this and that and it's gonna happen. Okay. That's a whole different ball game when you're dealing with a major power. So if India doesn't buy Russian oil, then somebody else will buy it. Okay. Companies will change. Only thing is the supply chain logistics change. And the other thing that's gonna happen is that Russians are going to double down on protecting their supply chain. And if that escalates, then that will lead to something else, even much worse, right? So if India starts buying it, then clearly somebody else will take it. So that's another reason that India is afraid of that. India has a fear of losing the market and opportunity of all these things to somebody else. Not to mention, you lose the market, you are taking a loss of 2 to 3 billion dollars to almost 5 to 6 billion dollars over 5 years consistently. Like, it's not like that you're going to take one time loss. That loss is going to be continuous. Why? Because you're going to buy it from somebody else, and you're going to buy from somebody else, you're going to adjust your refineries for that oil that is expensive, and you're paying more price over there. You're losing that $15 per barrel margin. If you do the calculation on the $15 per barrel margin, that comes down to almost $12 billion profit per year. Now, over 5 years, that's like $60 billion. So you are actually losing that money, that much loss, plus additional $5 to $6 billion loss on an average. So you are actually taking almost $60 to $70 billion loss in 5 years. Look at the numbers and you decide. So why would India want to do that? Just saying. And not to mention, buy when India buys Russian oil, then rock solid. India already has a rock solid uh, strategic autonomy. India has rock solid supply chain buildup from Vladivostok to Chennai corridor. That's whole entire protected supply chain. There is Russia, there is China, then India comes to its own home area, that is Strait of Malacca and all that, and then in its own waters. Nobody is there to disrupt their supply chain. Not to mention, there is Arctic angle too. When India is with Russia, this whole oil supply, this is a big game I'm talking about. This whole entire oil supply is pretty much unlimited for next 100 years, you can say. And imagine that. Imagine providing the cheaper oil and controlling the market at the same time. And you have unlimited supply from Russia. And if India starts to do the trade dealing with Canada too, which is already in works. So what's going to happen is that India has two countries in the Arctic, two major Arctic countries where India is going to get this whole entire oil crude just to sell it all over the place at a much cheaper than the crude benchmark pricing in the market. So that's the primary angle here. Okay, now finally, I think that there is a strategic autonomy too. That is strategic autonomy is that India is India has been in this whole thing. India is a great power. Okay, uh, India is a great power. So you don't go and a civilization that too at a civilizational great powers. Great powers have this civilizational great powers have this tendency that they are very resilient. So they will figure out the alternatives. They will figure out a way to do their things. Why? Because that's how they have survived over thousands of years. So so when it comes to and why they did that, they will do all this to maintain their strategic autonomy. They will do all this to maintain their financial sovereignty. They will do that to economic sovereignty. All these things, they're to keep that thing intact. They will do this. Why? Because if they succumb to this pressure today, they will have to deal with the same problem down the line too. It's not like this is one off thing. I will give you a simple example. Let's go back to President Trump's first term. What happened in the first term? In the first term, President Trump asked India to not buy Iranian oil. He gave them 6 months that, yeah, okay, take your time. You can stop buying then 6 months, is that. And the reason being that, oh, Iranians are doing terrorism, nuclear, and this and that whole 9 yard theory was given. What happened? They closed this oil source for India that was pretty close to India. Why? Because that is rock solid supply chain for India. That is uninterrupted supply chain. And if India has to buy oil from Iran today, that is it. That is pretty much India's waters actually. So, but India stopped buying Iranian oil. But did that stop America? Did that stop US from asking India to stop buying oil from some other country? No, it didn't. They again came back and what says saying what? Oh, please don't buy oil from Russia. Then tomorrow it will be somebody else, then somebody else, then somebody else. And that's what the problem is that you have. So that's why India has to stop that thing right then and there. The same thing they did with Venezuela too. India used to buy Venezuela, used to be the second largest exporter of oil to India back in the day. Okay. It was Venezuela, Russia, Iran, and your West Asia. But then they sanctioned Venezuela. And then they told India that, oh, you're not going to buy it from them. So India had to bite tooth and nail to just simply get the exemption from the sanctions to keep buying the Venezuelan oil. Why? Because India was buying the light crude from it, because light crude helps them getting the petrol and all that. So that's why to maintain this strategic autonomy. If you are growing, if you're industrializing, if you're living in the fourth industrial revolution, your energy requirement is growing. India cannot go and play this game of uh, oil, stop buying oil from this country, that country, please listen to us, this, that. No, that's not their that does not actually feed their requirement. That doesn't help their situation. So they're not going to stop buying the Russian oil. Apart from all the benefits and all the strategy, all the calculation I just showed you, that's the whole game here. Down the line, in next 5 to 10 years, you will see that lots of crude producing countries are going to centralize their crude supplies to India and Indian refineries in different regions, and those refineries will be selling the crude, refined crude products to other countries. That's the game. That's the big game. Okay. So I hope you guys learned something from this video. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please do like and subscribe, and I will talk to you guys in another video. Take care.